guys, Miss Mutu here with another knowledge video. Today we are diving into we're still on unit 9, fairy tales, but today we're doing lesson 6. Lesson 6 is all about a fairy tale that you might have heard before. It involves two children and their name are Hansel and Gretel. So I want you to sit back and stay tuned to see what you can learn about this fairy tale. Before we jump into our new story, let's review what we already learned. So, fairy tales have several common elements. What are some of these elements that fairy tales have? Okay, let's review. Fairy tales have settings, which are where and when a story takes place. Characters, they may have real characters or magical characters. They have an element of fantasy, meaning something magical or that can't happen in real life. There's problems in fairy tales and there's also solutions. And at the end of fairy tales, the characters always live happily ever after. So those are the elements of fairy tales. Today, you are going to read a new fairy tale called Hansel and Gretel, which is about a brother and sister who have a problem that must be solved. Before we jump into our story, let's review what we know about fantasy and reality. I'm going to show you an image card, and you're going to tell me whether it belongs on the fantasy side of the chart, meaning magical, or on the reality side of the chart, meaning something that might appear or happen in real life. Get ready to view the image card. What do you see in this image? Does this image show something that can happen in real life? Is there anything in this image that can't happen in real life? This is an image of a royal family. I'm looking at the image and I see royalty. It's definitely nothing magical or mystical or made up. This image goes on the, drum roll please, reality side of the chart. So if you guess reality, give yourself a pat on the back. This is something that is real. So we're going to continue to add to our chart as we meet and encounter more fairy tales. Now let's get ready to sit back or sit up and pay attention to what we're going to learn, see, or notice in today's fairy tale, Hansel and Gretel, part 1. As we're reading, I want you to listen carefully to find out what problem Hansel and Gretel have and how they try to solve the problem. If you're already familiar with the story, that's okay. I want you to listen to see if this might be a different version from something that you already know. Get ready. Point to the characters as I read the story. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest, there lived a poor woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was named Hansel, and the girl was named Gretel. The family never had very much to eat. And now, when times were hard, people around the land were starving, and the woodcutter could not get enough food to feed his family. As he laid in bed one night, tossing and turning with worry, he turned to his wife and said, "What's going to happen to us? How can we feed our poor children when we don't even have enough to feed ourselves?" How do you think the woodsman and his wife will solve the problem of not having enough food to eat? What do you think? All right, let's jump back in and see. "Listen to me," said his wife. "Early tomorrow morning, the cold-hearted or unkind woman said, 'We will take the children deep into the woods. We'll give each of them a piece of bread and make a fire. Then we'll leave them and go about our work. They won't find their way home in time for dinner, and we will not have to share.'" "No," said the man. "I can't do that. I can't leave my children alone in the woods where there are wild animals. It will get dark and cold as the sun sets." "Then you're a fool," snapped the woman. "You might as well accept it that we will all starve." Then she kept at the poor man until at last he agreed. "But I feel sorry for my poor children," he said quietly. The 2 children were so hungry that they had not been able to sleep, and so they heard everything their stepmother said to their father. Gretel cried, but Hansel whispered, "Don't worry, I'll think of something." And when their parents had gone to sleep, Hansel got up, put on his little coat, and sneaked outside. The moon was shining brightly, and the white pebbles that laid in the front of the house glittered like silver coins. The pebbles sparkled. Hansel stooped and filled the pockets of his coat with as many pebbles as it would hold. Then he tiptoed back to bed and said to Gretel, "Go to sleep, little sister." Why do you think Hansel gathered pebbles? All right, let's read and find out. At daybreak, the woman came and woke the two children. Daybreak is when it first becomes light in the morning. "Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to the forest to get some wood." She gave them each a piece of bread and said, "That's your food for the day. Don't eat it all at once, because it is all you're going to get. We have supper after we return from the woods. That is, if you are home in time." Do you think they'll be home in time for supper? Gretel carried both pieces of bread in her apron, for Hansel's pockets were full of pebbles. They all started out of their way into the forest. As they walked, Hansel kept turning and looking behind at the house again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what are you looking at? You must watch where you're going." "Oh," said Hansel, "I'm just looking at my little white kitten sitting on the roof of the house to say goodbye." Do you think Hansel's really looking at his kitten? Why did he say this? His wife said, "You little fool, that's not your kitten. That is just the sun shining on the chimney. Now come along." But Hansel stayed a few steps behind and kept turning, and each time he turned, he dropped a pebble from his pocket to mark the way. When they were deep in the forest, the father said, "Gather some firewood, children. I'll start a fire so you won't get cold while we work." Hansel and Gretel gathered a little mountain of twigs and sticks, and when the fire was burning, the wife said, "Stay by the fire, you two. We have to go and cut wood. When we are finished, we'll come back to get you." Are they really coming back? So Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. After a time, they ate their bread, and after a longer time, they got so tired that they closed their eyes and fell asleep. When they woke, it was dark, and they were all alone. Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. Hansel tried to make her feel better. "Wait a little until the moon rises," he said. When the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which glittered like silver coins, and showed them the way. What does a full moon look like? The light from the full moon caused the pebbles to glitter. They walked on through the night, and at last, at the break of day, they came to their father's house. They knocked on the door, and when the woman opened, she was shocked. She was very surprised to see Hansel and Gretel. But all she said was, "Why are you here? Why did you not stay in the forest? We thought you were never going to come home again." Why do you think she would say this? Of course, their father was glad to see them, for it had broken his heart to leave them alone. Not very long afterwards, times were hard again, and there was little food to eat. Again, the children heard their stepmother say to their father one night, "There's nothing left but half a loaf of bread. After that, we're done. We don't have enough for ourselves and the children. This time we'll take them so deep in the forest that they won't find their way back for a week." "But wife," said the man with a heavy heart, "it would be better to share our last bite of food with the children." But the wife will not listen to him, and she knew if she kept at him, she could get him to give in and agree with her plans, just like he did before. Much later, when their parents were asleep, Hansel got up to collect pebbles just as he did before, but he couldn't get out. His stepmother had figured out how they had found their way home last time, and she locked the door. So Hansel got back in bed and tried to think of a different plan. What do you think his plan will be this time? Early in the morning, the woman roused the children out of bed. She gave them a piece of bread, even smaller than before. As they walked into the woods, Hansel broke up the bread in his pocket, and every once in a while he stopped to throw a crumb on the ground. Hansel, said his father, what do you keep stopping and looking for? I'm looking at a little pigeon sitting at the roof and wants to say goodbye to me, answered Hansel. Do you think Hansel is really looking at a pigeon? Why do you think he's saying this? Little fool, said his wife. That is not a pigeon. That's only the sun shining on the chimney. So they walked on, and Hansel dropped breadcrumbs all along the way. The woman led the children deeper into the forest than they had been in their lives. Again, they gathered sticks from a fire, and the woman said, sit there, children, and when you are tired, go to sleep. We're going to cut wood, and when we're finished, we'll come back and get you. Later, when it was lunchtime, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel because he had left his in crumbs along the path. Then they fell asleep. As evening came, no one came to get them. When they woke, it was dark, and they were alone. When the moon rose, they started for home, but they could not find the breadcrumbs. The birds had eaten them up. Come, Gretel, said Hansel. I know we can find our way. But they couldn't find it. When they went on all night and the next day from morning until evening, but they could not find their way out of the forest. They were terribly hungry, for they had nothing to eat but a few berries. When they were so tired that they could drag themselves no further, they laid down under the tree and fell asleep. What do you think is going to happen next? What else do you think is going to happen next? Well, we'll have to tune in for next time. For now that we're finished with our story, we're going to answer the following comprehension questions about the different story elements of this story. So, let's get started. Remember, as we're answering reading comprehension questions, our job is to go back into the text to find specific evidence to help us answer our question. Ms. Mutu will read the question 2 times, giving a pause for you to give a response. Then I'll go back into the text to add more details to our questions by rereading key points of the text that help us with our response. Get ready for question 1. What characters appear in the story? Are they real or magical? Again, what characters appear in the story? Are they real or magical? Okay, let's go back into the text to see if we can find some support for our answer. Get ready. Once upon a time, near a deep, dark forest, lived a poor woodcutter, his wife, and 2 children. The boy was named Hansel and the girl was named Gretel. The family never had very much to eat, and now when times are hard, people around them in the land were starving. Now, as I was rereading, I noticed that the characters are the poor woodcutter, that's number 1, his wife, number 2, the 2 children, Hansel and Gretel, and these characters are all real. I know they're real because there's nothing magical about them, and it doesn't say anything about a fantasy. These can all be characters in real life. In the read aloud you heard, Gretel began to cry, but Hansel comforted her. The word is comforted. Say it with me, comforted. One more time, comforted. If you have been comforted, someone has tried to make you feel better when you were sad or upset. My mother comforted me when my best friend moved away. Have you ever been comforted by someone? Have you ever comforted another person? Try to use the word comforted when you tell me about it. For example, I comforted my sister when her dog was sick. She was crying and really sad, and I hugged her and told her that it will be okay. I have another example. I comforted, let's see if I can think of someone in Flatbush. I comforted Miranda when she was upset. I let her know that it's okay to make mistakes. So comfort is when you say something or do something to make someone feel better. Now, what word have we been talking about? Yes, comforted. That's the word. So now let's do a little activity. I will ask you a question. Think about how you will answer the question. Be sure to use the word comforted in your response. Question number 1. Have you ever been comforted by a friend? Yes, I have been comforted by a friend. Question number 2. Have you ever comforted a friend? Yes, I have comforted many friends. Have you ever been comforted by someone in your family? Yes, I have been comforted by my mom when I'm not feeling well or upset about something. Have you ever comforted someone in your family? Yeah, I comfort my little sister all the time. She always thinks things are a big deal and she gets really sad about stuff. But I comfort her and hug her and let her know that things are not that serious. Have you ever been comforted by a teacher? Yes, I'm comforted by Mr. Nickerson all the time. When I'm unsure about something or not confident or feel bad about something, he always tells me that it's going to be fine. He's really good at comforting people. And that's the activity. Good job. Make sure you use the word comforted today or in a situation when you're trying to make someone feel better. In this portion of the lesson, we're going to review narrative writing. That means we're going to review the process that we take as writers in order to write about the stories or things that we have read or learned. So I want you to look at this poster. Who can tell me the 3 steps of the writing process? All right, let's put our fingers up. Get ready. The first step is plan. The next step is draft. And the third step is edit. Again, say it with me. Plan, draft, edit. Again, plan, draft, edit. One more time. Plan, draft, edit. Good job. Over the next several lessons, you will plan, draft, and edit your own retell of your favorite fairy tale you heard so far. So we have been using graphic organizers to plan our writing already. So far, we've used 2 different kinds of organizers. Do you guys know what those organizers are? It's okay, take a guess. Then I'm going to show them in exactly 2 seconds. Get ready. 1, 2. The first one is the elements of a fairy tale chart, and the next one are Venn diagrams. I will show you an example of a written retell of a fairy tale, and then you'll be able to later use this as help to writing your own. Here's the fairy tale we're going to focus on. It's one that you already know. So what I'm going to do now is read the model of the story Cinderella, the narrative that was written, and I'm going to just break down each part of the narrative to help us understand how to write one. So the first part is called the introductory statement, and the title is Cinderella. Once upon a time, Cinderella wanted to go to the ball at the castle, but she was not allowed to, had no way of getting there, and had nothing to wear. How does this introductory statement begin? How do many fairy tales begin? Yeah, it begins with the words once upon a time. Now let's move on to the body. As I read, I want you to pay close attention to how the body is structured or set up. Here we go. Then her fairy godmother appeared and helped Cinderella get ready for the ball. Cinderella went to the ball and met the prince. When she left, she lost her shoe, but the prince used it to find her. So now, What do we call the sequence of events in the story? Yeah, we call those the plot. What is special about the events in a fairy tale? Think about it. In fairy tales, there's often fantasy or something magical that happens. There's a problem and a solution. So in the body, I stated the problem, right? She couldn't go to the ball. I stated the solution. Her fairy godmother came to help her. And something magical is that she has a fairy godmother. That's magical. And she was able to make it to the ball. Now let's keep reading and talk about the concluding statement. Here we go. The prince and Cinderella married and lived happily ever after. How do most fairy tales end? Yeah, most fairy tales, they always live happily ever after. What other elements do you notice that fairy tales include and that are in the retell? Yeah, we talked about magical characters. We also talked about royalty. Point to the magical characters in the retell. Point to the royalty. If you pointed to the godmother, that is correct. And if you pointed to the prince, that's also correct because those are examples of both. So in the next lessons coming up, you will plan, draft, and edit your own retell. I want you to think about your favorite fairy tale. Say it to me, and then I'll tell you mine. What's your favorite one? Mine is Rumpelstiltskin. Now, I want you to share with me on the screen the story that you're going to be writing about in the next lessons. And I'll share with you the story that I'm going to be writing about in the next lessons. Okay, cool. I'm going to write about Rumpelstiltskin because it's my favorite. What does it mean to be a hero? What else does it mean? A hero is a brave and good man or boy, and a heroine is a brave and good woman or girl. Someone who is heroic is very brave or daring and good. So we're going to examine these three words: hero, heroine, and heroic. I'm going to show you a chart in 3, 2, 1. Just kidding. Before I can show you the chart, we need to break down these three words: hero, heroine, and heroic. What do we notice that these words have in common? Look very closely at the words. What do you see that all three words have? All three words contain the base or the root word hero. All three words refer to someone or a person or action that is brave, daring, and good. Someone who is evil or is bad or wicked is the opposite of heroic. We are going to compare evil characters in the tales that you read so far and heroic ones. We'll be using this chart to help us organize our ideas. So on here, the heroic and evil characters chart, we will see how characters are heroic, record that and their description, and we'll also see how characters are evil, record that and explain their description. So in the next read aloud, Hansel and Gretel part 2, you'll encounter an evil character. So we want to make sure that we're differentiating characters that are really, really evil to characters that are, heroic or great. So here's the chart that I came up with. I didn't go through every single story because I haven't experienced every single story. So I just took the time to zoom in on the stories that I have experienced with you guys. So far, Miss Mutu has taught you 3 different stories. I've taught you Sleeping Beauty. I've taught you Rumpelstiltskin. And I also taught you Hansel and Gretel. So I'm going to dive into the heroes and evil characters of those 3 stories. So let's start with Sleeping Beauty. So Sleeping Beauty, I put an heroic character in Sleeping Beauty as the prince. And the reason is 100 years has passed and he entered the kingdom, and he and Sleeping Beauty lived happily ever after. So he was really brave to go into this kingdom that no one has ever gone into ever before, and basically was on a mission to set out and undo the spell. So it was very heroic or brave of him. The next story where I found someone heroic or brave was Hansel and Gretel. I chose to focus on Hansel. I chose Hansel because the reason was he came up with a plan to save his sister and to find his way home. He was brave and clever. We know that the stepmother wanted them gone. So at first he gathered some pebbles. That was the first thing that he used. And he used that. And he put pebbles on the ground to, give himself up halfway back home. Then when he couldn't get the pebbles, he used what he had, which was bread, and tried to use that as a way. So I feel like he's very heroic because he's trying to make sure that him and his sister are safe. So let's move on to the evil characters. So in Sleeping Beauty, the character that I thought was really evil was the fairy, because she cast a spell on Sleeping Beauty because she wasn't invited to the party. The next evil character in Rumpelstiltskin was Rumpelstiltskin. The reason I thought he was evil, this was pretty tough for me because he did help the miller's daughter out, but every time he helped her, she had to give him something, and he didn't really do it because he was kind. He did it because he wanted something, and I feel like that was really evil. The last evil character is a character in Hansel and Gretel, which is the stepmother. The stepmother is evil because she wanted all of the food for herself and wanted the dad to abandon his kids in the forest. So this is my chart, or our chart, of the 3 stories that Miss Mutu has read with you guys. Now let's use this chart in order to answer the question for today's activity. So the question for today's activity is, write about who the best hero is from the stories we have heard so far. Make sure to support your opinion. Again, write about who you think is the best hero from the stories we've heard so far. Make sure to support your opinion. I kind of chose a story that we didn't read. I chose the story of Rapunzel, and here's my example. So I drew a picture and I chose to focus on the prince. This is me trying to draw the prince, and this is me trying to draw his horse. So let me go read and say what I wrote. The best hero from the stories we have read so far is the prince from Rapunzel. I chose him because he is clever and brave. He really wanted to save Rapunzel and did not give up even when he did not know how to get into the tower. He went back to hear her sing and was able to observe a strategy he could use to get her, and then they lived happily ever after. So this was me explaining why I chose the prince. I chose the prince because he didn't just sit around and wait for things to happen for him. He saw something he wanted. He kept visiting her to hear her sing every day, and he decided to take action. And it wasn't easy, and it definitely was dangerous, but he did it anyways because he wanted to rescue her. So I think he's extremely heroic, meaning brave and also clever. I wonder who you're going to pick. Make sure that you upload your work to Class Dojo so your teacher can check it in your portfolios. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed watching and learning something new about fairy tales. I'm excited to see your work. Your teachers are excited to see your work. Make sure you upload onto your Class Dojo portfolio. If you don't know how to do that, reach out to your teacher to do it. And see you soon. Hope you enjoy. Have a wonderful, wonderful break.